I can't help but feel we've been lied to, and I want to set the record straight. When it comes to investing, we've always been told that buying property and then renting it out is one of the most lucrative ways to generate passive income. We're told that if you find a good property, you can rent it out, earn good returns, repeat the process, and before you know it, you'll be a millionaire with tens of thousands of pounds in monthly passive income. We're fed these sorts of narratives by people online like this who say, if I can do it, there's no reason you can't do it too. All you've got to do is do your research, find the right deals, and most importantly, buy my courses. And as you'll be able to tell by my satirical tone as well as the title of this video, I think that this sort of messaging in today's day and age is complete bullshit. And don't get me wrong, I do think that these property influencers have made a hell of a lot of money through property, but if you're trying to get into the buy-to-let game today, as far as I'm concerned, that money-making ship has sailed. Having owned rental property myself, I'm speaking from experience, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about why I think renting out property is no longer a good investing decision. First up, there's stamp duty. If you're buying your first home or your only home, these are the rates of stamp duty that you'll currently pay. However, on the 1st of April 2016, an additional rate of stamp duty was introduced for people purchasing additional residential properties. This was originally 3% on top of the existing stamp duty rates, but today it stands at 5%. To make matters worse, from the 1st of April 2025, the price at which you start paying stamp duty will come down from £250,000 to £125,000, starting at 2%, making buying your first property and additional properties even more expensive. When buying property, you've also got a load of other upfront costs, like putting down a deposit, which is typically an absolute minimum 5% of the value of the property. But if you're buying a house through a buy-to-let mortgage, you're going to have to pay somewhere near 25% or above for a deposit. But let's keep it simple and stick with residential mortgages for now. You'll also have things like legal fees, so solicitors, which are typically in the ballpark of around £2,000, as well as things like surveys, where you might as well just chuck another grand in there. So let's say you bought your first property worth £300,000 and you've already spent at least 20 grand before you've even moved in. For any additional property you buy after your first home, the upfront costs for a £300,000 home are now over £35,000. And remember, it's only the deposit, so only £15,000 that actually goes towards paying for the house. The rest of that, so £20,000, is gone. And as I mentioned before, from the 1st of April 2025, stamp duty is going to get even higher, meaning in these two scenarios, you're going to pay an additional 2.5 grand. Another big issue with the idea of trying to make money through renting out property is that property prices relative to wages are the most expensive they've ever been for about 150 years. In fact, today, the average house price is around 9 times annual earnings. And compare this to 30 years ago, where house prices were half the price relative to your wages. And let's not forget that because of wildly high house prices, the average age of a first-time buyer in the UK is now 34 years old. It was 24 years old 50 years ago. And on top of that, now more than 50% of people can't even afford to get onto the housing ladder without the help of the bank of mum and dad. So how the hell are people going to be able to afford to put down a deposit for one house, let alone 2, 3, 4 houses that they're going to rent out? Okay, so let's say you do buy an additional house anyway, and you decide to rent it out. Unfortunately, you're going to piss most of your money away paying for the extra stamp duty costs, meaning you'll have to take out more of a mortgage. But don't worry, when it comes to paying your tax return, you can just deduct the mortgage as a taxable expense, right? Nope. As of April 2020, landlords can't deduct mortgage interest or other expenses from rental income. And this is a real problem, especially if you're renting your property out soon after buying it, because mortgages are front-loaded with interest, meaning you'll be paying predominantly more interest for at least the first half of your mortgage term. So for example, let's say your rental income is £1,000 a month and your mortgage is £800 a month, of which £700 of that is interest, you're only taking home £100 a month. And once again, this is only referring to residential mortgages. If you were to take out a buy-to-let mortgage, not only would you need a bigger down payment of 25% at least, but your interest rates on your mortgage would also be higher. In addition to your mortgage, you've also got to factor in other costs as well, like property management costs and maintenance and repairs. In my first week of renting out my property, I had to unexpectedly fork out an additional £500 to fit in a new washing machine. What was really annoying about this is that I just paid £100 the week before to get the washing machine professionally cleaned so that it was spick and span for the new tenants. A couple of days after that, some bees decided to set up camp in the vent of the tenant's bedroom, meaning that they were woken up at silly hours in the morning to the sound of amplified bees in a vent.
You like jazz?
So there was a cost associated with sorting all that out as well. Another crucifying expense you need to be aware of before renting out property is something called a property license fee. This snuck up on me completely unexpectedly when I received an email from my property management company saying, the council have said you'll need to pay £800 for a property licence fee. I said £800, but for what? They said for renting out your property. So everyone in the area had to apply and pay for a licence just so that they could rent out their property. And what really pissed me off about this is that the reason in part that these property licence fees are put in place is to make sure that the property is being properly looked after by the landlord. And it didn't matter whatsoever that I was already paying thousands of pounds a year in property management fees, service charges and ground rent just to look after the property. And the annoying thing is that a property license isn't like a driver's license where you just get one and then you can drive any car you want. You need a property license for every property you own. They're expensive and they typically only last about 5 years. So what I'm sure you can all see with higher house prices, introduction of higher stamp duty, not being able to deduct interest from your mortgage, is that all of those changes are relatively recent. And the government has put these changes in place to try and discourage people from buying or owning multiple homes simply by making it unaffordable. And that's probably why up to 2/3 of landlords are planning on selling the properties they rent out within the next 2 years. And if the complete unaffordability of houses wasn't enough, you've also got other things to worry about, like the introduction of the Renters' Rights Bill, which is coming into place in spring 2025. This is going to include abolishing no-fault evictions, making it harder for landlords to regain possession of their property, the introduction of no minimum tenancy terms, which means the tenant's contracts will operate on a rolling month-to-month basis with no minimum term, and more legislation around being able to increase the rent. And whilst those regulations are coming in this year, I wouldn't be surprised if there were more regulations like that coming in future years in favour of renters over landlords. And don't get me wrong, I actually don't think these changes are bad. I actually agree with improving renters' rights at a time where there's a housing crisis and rent is at an all-time high. The point I'm trying to make is that if trying to make money through renting out property wasn't already hard enough, it's only going to get harder. And this goes for renting out property in your personal name as well as under a limited company. And to top it all off, you could have shitty tenants who make your life an absolute misery. Plus there's the fact that people think that landlords are property hoarding twats. But we're providing you with an essential service. No, you're not. You're buying up all the houses, causing a huge imbalance in supply and demand, which is driving up house prices, meaning people can't afford to buy houses because they're putting all their hard-earned cash into your pockets instead, you greedy c***. With all that said, this doesn't mean I think that investing in property is a bad investment in general, especially if it's your main home and you see yourself living there for the long term. And remember, every time you move home, you're going to be losing money to stamp duty and legal fees and moving costs and everything else. And I'm personally an advocate for paying off a mortgage as opposed to paying rent, so that way your money is going towards an appreciating asset as opposed to a landlord's pocket. And on that note, house prices are expected to continue rising over the next few years, with some forecasts predicting over a 23% increase in house prices within the next 5 years. There are even some economists like Gary Stevenson who think that house prices could double within the next 5 years. When I bought my flat in 2020, I bought it for £182,500. And 5 years later, in March 2020, I'm going to be selling it for £250,000, which is a 37% increase, or roughly 7.5% per year. My next move is to use that money as leverage, take out a mortgage, and use that to buy an even more expensive property so that my money can appreciate faster in absolute terms. And it's important to remember that this isn't financial advice, this is just my opinion, but I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts in the comments. Mainly because there are some absolute trolls in the comment section who come up with comedy gold. You know who you are. I mean, if you're on the fence about subscribing to this channel, just do it anyway so you can read the comments in the comment section. They are outrageous. For example, in my last video where I was talking about the UK's economic crisis, I got called both a left-wing snowflake and a right-wing Nazi. Anyway, I hope you found this video interesting, insightful, and/or entertaining. That's it from me. I'll see you in the next one.